This program is made possible in major part by the Adolph Coors Company. Additional funding was provided by public television stations.
I'm Robert Duval. The program you're about to see is the story of a friend of mine, George Mendoza, a world-class athlete, a middle-distance runner. He's won silver and bronze medals in competitions all over the world. But they weren't the biggest challenges or the greatest victories in George's life. Since the age of 15, George has had to fight a bigger battle, the loss of his sight, of blindness. You know what it's like to walk around in a dark room, even one you know very well? Just imagine closing your eyes and running at full speed across country or around a crowded track, and you'll get some idea of what George has to face almost every day of his life. Now, every story is just a series of scenes intertwined with the lives of those he meets along the way. Well, this is George's story, George's scenes, filled with those who love him. I hope you enjoy it.
People can get in a car and have that sense of freedom. I can't do that. So my freedom is just to go out in the desert, get into my own head, and no worries exist in the world, and catch that second wind. The second wind is like, there's no pain, there's no worry, you're just free.
George forgets his problems when he runs. He can't see the beauty of the sunrise or the sunset. He can't see the rolling waves of sand in the desert, but he feels it, and deep down inside, he knows he can conquer all. His goal in life? To make all people with disabilities see that.
This is how you fly, and I'm not talking about getting high. You try.
George speaks at universities and high schools all over the country. He's an inspiration to all people and a role model to Hispanic Americans.
And TRY stands for this. The T stands for triumph, T-R-Y-U-M-P-H. Doesn't matter how many times you fail, not how many times you get knocked down, but the 1 or 2 times that you get back up, you just keep trying. The R stands for rewards and recognition, like when I received the National Trio Achievers Award, not for being handicapped, but for being an outstanding student. And you too will have those rewards and recognition, and you'll be proud of them. The Y is for you. You can make it happen, for yourself and for others. You have the power within yourself to overcome any obstacles and to help other people.
Since 1985, George has been coordinating handicap services at New Mexico State University. He makes sure new blind students can find their way around campus, and if they have any problems, he'll try his best to solve them.
George has been a big help to me, and just the fact that knowing he's over here and he doesn't mind me coming over and asking him for help whenever I truly do need it. And the fact is that I know I can depend on him whenever he's here. He knows what my problems are because he's experienced the very same thing.
Yeah, I get to my classes myself, but if I can't get to where I want to, like if I'm running out of time, I call George, and he's always there to help.
George motivates people to do things they didn't think were possible.
George could see the book before I could. I told him I wanted to do it, and I had started writing a little bit on it, and I showed it to him. He said, well, Gary, you should write it, you should write it. I said, but I can't see to write it. And he said, so that's just an obstacle. How can we fix that?
George doesn't just help the blind, he helps all students with disabilities at the university.
Say, for example, a student is wheelchair-bound and can't get into a certain classroom because of the lack of access to the classroom. George would be calling the professor, calling the person who schedules rooms, and trying to make arrangements, either for the classroom to be moved or some kind of arrangement so the student can interact in the classroom.
George works with students outside the classroom as well. Every semester, he goes to the New Mexico School for the Visually Handicapped, which is 60 miles from his home, to run with blind students. This special track with a rail allows the students to feel their way around. And for those who aren't interested in running, George spearheaded MNSU's wheelchair basketball games, held every semester at the school. George is known for making things happen. Ask for favors just for a chance.
I think George is one of the few people that I've ever met in my life, either sighted or non-sighted, that is self-actualized. He knows what he wants, he goes for it, and he realizes that there are some things that he's not going to reach, you can't reach for, but he certainly takes advantage of every one of those that he can.
His supervisor, Patricia Wolf, says George is an indispensable part of the university.
He has a positive attitude, and instead of looking at what has not yet been done, he concentrates on all the progress we have made and comes up with ideas on things we can do now. And I think that's the attitude that we need to continue growing.
But even George will admit his attitude hasn't always been so positive. George was living in Long Island, New York, when he found out he had a rare eye disease called fundus flavomaculatus.
He has a disorder of the retina. This is known as the macula. The macula is the very central portion of the retina which is responsible for clear or sharp vision or reading vision. And the rest of his retina is mildly involved. And all of this means that George will have difficulty, a variable degree of difficulty with reading and sharp vision in the distance. We know that this macular problem can be inherited or passed on from one generation to another, but curiously, most patients don't have a distinct family history. In addition to difficulty with reading, George will have difficulty with discriminating or seeing clearly objects in the distance, for example, movies or driving. He will never lose all of his vision because the peripheral vision, or his side vision, will remain relatively intact.
Here's how George sees this scene.
I see colors within 8 feet in front of me, and then after that, it just goes into a gray. If I look straight ahead, there's nothing there.
In just 6 months, George lost 80% of his vision. He went from being a popular athlete who played basketball, football, and ran track to being an outcast. When he didn't go out for the basketball team that year, his peers thought he was copping out.
They just decided that I was a quitter because in their mind I could see, and like they would say, well, he was faking it or something like that. I was very angry with God, life, people. I still think it goes back to why me? I remember just not being able to not really believing that this was kind of happening to me, I guess.
George's mother had a tough time with it as well.
When I first began to realize how serious George's eye problem was, it was scary. I was scared. As a matter of fact, at the hospital, when George came out of the examining room and he said, "Mom, they think it's something very rare, and they don't know anything about it." And then he went running back into the examining room. I was frightened. I went to the ladies' room and I looked out the window. This was the hospital in Manhattan, and looking out the window, I saw a basketball court, and all I could think of was, George won't play basketball maybe again. And I just started crying. I was very upset and concerned. And I looked out the window and I thought, I don't know if I can handle this myself. And I was scared. When he first lost his sight, The hardest thing, I think, was his friends. Suddenly his friends were frightened. It was very difficult because he was so popular and he was so active in sports and music, and it was a time that was difficult. Suddenly his friends said, wow, maybe this is catchy, and he finally found out who his real friends and true friends were, and it came down to one or two.
George fought to stay in public school for the next 2 years. It was by no means easy. He was forbidden to participate in any team sports, and he had to take oral tests. He was becoming increasingly frustrated, bitter, and angry.
Well, when George was a senior in high school, we realized that it was important for him to get out of New York area, the pollution, the dampness, the climate, and it seemed like on rainy days his eyes bothered him more. On snowy days he could hardly see. He was complaining always about specks in his vision that he was having a hard time seeing. And my parents had moved to New Mexico, Las Cruces, to retire, and we decided to visit them. And after we visited them, George said, oh, I can see so good here. He was really excited.
George enrolled at the New Mexico School for the Visually Handicapped in Alamogordo for his senior year in high school. He immediately joined the wrestling and track teams. That's where he met Winford Haynes. Winford has won 3 gold medals in the Olympic Games for the physically disabled, even though he's completely blind. George says it was Winford who inspired him to get back into competitive running.
To see somebody totally blind run 60 meters, 100 meters, quarter mile with a sighted guide, it was incredible. He had such an incredible will to live despite his disability.
George graduated from high school and was accepted at New Mexico State University, where he later received a bachelor's degree in individualized studies. He trained with the track team in his freshman year. In the following 8 years, he racked up gold, silver, and bronze medals in running events all over the world. In 1979, he held the national record for legally blind runners in the 1,500-meter run. The next year, he broke that and set another one in the 800-meter run. He competed in the 1980 Olympics for the physically disabled in Holland and the 1984 International Games for the disabled. But the ultimate challenge of George's running career was the Baylor Pass Run in 1984. It was held in the Organ Mountains in southern New Mexico. George trained for the race with his friend Louis Burke, a well-known junior lightweight boxing champion. He was George's sighted guide for the race. The two ran about 10 miles a day for 4 months to get in shape for the event.
Sometimes when I'm injured, I have to run the sand. I think what I enjoy most about those training runs with Louis is that the runs are never like boring, they're never like torture, they're just real relaxed. We really get into it, and we have a lot of fun. We're always laughing.
As the date crept forward, the workouts intensified. It was cold and drizzly on race day. Both men were nervous. Baylor Pass is a grueling race. It starts at 4,900 feet, climbs 4 miles, then goes downhill for 2 miles, not on roads, but on treacherous mountain trails.
Okay, your attention, please. We'll give 2 announcements. Set, and then fire the gun. Okay, all runners, set.
It's a scary run because, like, half the trails are full of rocks. And the trails, they're not really straight. They're, like, on sides of cliffs.
Right. 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 Open up. Let's go. Come on.
Of the 170 runners, George was the only one with a visual handicap. He didn't win, but he completed the race, which in itself is a great accomplishment. Afterwards, there was a big celebration for all the runners. George had a lot to be proud of. He had just conquered what he considered the most difficult race in the nation. It took hard work, but George is used to that. He's a dedicated man not only to his sport, but to his family. He and his wife, Maria, have a different home life than most couples. Maria, who was born in Mexico, works full-time as a high school guidance counselor. George takes care of their 2 children in the morning and goes to the office in the afternoon when they're in school.
George is a very sensitive person, very, very sensitive with the kids especially. So I've had to be the bad guy. You know, it's always, he spends more time with the kids. So it's always, behave, you better settle down or else I'm telling your mother.
George and Maria met, ironically, at a wedding reception. Maria didn't realize George was blind at first, but that didn't matter to her when she found out. That's what George says makes her so special.
Met Maria, and she was like the only woman that was, you know, the right woman for me. She doesn't really view my handicap as a handicap. She's always joking like, you know, you're not handicapped, you're just, you know, just pulling our leg or something like that. That's the kind of attitude you don't really need somebody to feel sorry for you.
2 years later, they were married and had a baby boy named Michael. George had all the concerns any new father has with a firstborn, but his big worry was he had no experience with his own father. His parents split up when he was only 3 months old.
See, I never had a father figure in my life, and I was always pretty nervous about having to be a father, you know, myself. But Michael loves me so much that it makes it really easy to love him back.
Now the Mendozas have a girl, too, named Mary Lou. George and Maria have a unique relationship based on mutual respect.
She's a very, very strong woman, very brilliant woman, very smart, very intelligent.
What I admire the most about George is his persistence. I think a lot of people would have given up a long time ago in their dreams and in their drive to accomplish certain things. And, you know, once George has something in his mind, he goes for it.
Where does George get that strength, that inspiration? He says it comes from his mother.
You know, she's a very powerful, inspiring person. She encouraged me
even though she probably couldn't even find the encouragement from herself to go ahead and strive and be somebody, you know, and do whatever you can, despite, you know, something like blindness. I think a lot of the positive energy that I have in my life, the force that I have in my life, is through her. And the thing that gets me is I don't know where it comes from, you know, within her, because she was a single parent. She had to do it on her own. And yet, you know, not only did we survive it, but we overcame it, you know, together. And I hope that, you know, in my future, if I have any successes, that, you know, it's really because of her.
His mother, his friends, his wife, all gave him strength and encouragement. But he found his soul in a place called Chimayo. The small adobe chapel is nestled in the mountains of northern New Mexico. It's known as a place of healing, a place where miracles happen. George heard about it, and shortly after he arrived in New Mexico, he visited the sanctuary.
I was really searching for something. Maybe not a miracle, maybe a miracle, I don't know. But what happened up in Chimayo the first time was just such a spiritual renewal of my spirit. I felt refreshed. I felt a new energy.
Every year, thousands of people make a pilgrimage to Chimayo, where they pray to walk again, see again, smile again. Many have their prayers answered. The faithful say Chimayo's holy earth in the healing well has something to do with it. George put the dirt on his eyes, and though he didn't get his sight back, he gained inner strength. The experience inspired him to write a poem.
The legend is when you go to Chimayo is that you're supposed to leave some type of gift for the church. People had left, you know, whatever was important to them. Money, people have left money, donated money to the church, beads, crosses.
But George wanted to leave something from his heart, so he found a piece of wood and wrote his thoughts down.
I just went up there and I found this big piece of wood, flat board by the river. It was completely untouched. It wasn't soiled or anything. I started writing on it, and that poem came to me just like that. By the time I had the magic marker in my hand, I just started writing. I am blind. I have traveled many miles to Chimayo. In its peace and silence, I have left this gift, a poem. I thought about it a little bit more, and I just started seeing the phrases in my mind, and I wrote each verse down just like that. That was the first. I didn't even rewrite that poem I just wrote.
That poem is still hanging on the wall of the church by the healing well.
I go back there, and I can't really say I'm looking for a physical healing or a miracle, although I believe one day I'll probably see again. I feel like I have a mission to accomplish under this condition, and once that's completed, that I probably might be able to see again.
Until then, he'll keep on helping others cope and help them to have hope.
Okay, can you feel the sidewalk here?
Where the sidewalk ends and the shrubs are?
Here's the bushes. Go ahead and just shoreline the bushes straight ahead.
There's two things that makes George different. One, George knows what love is about. George reaches beyond the cane, beyond the wheelchair, and he touches people. And that's what makes George special. And also, George has eyes of faith. And that is, he can see beyond the obstacle. He can see the dream. The dream is the reality. And reaching it is a process. And that's what he communicates to people. He gets people to see beyond that stick and beyond that wheelchair. And he's special. He's very special.
Every mountain can be climbed, no matter how high. Every problem has a solution. Every obstacle can be overcome. Every broken heart can be mended. And every handicap, every disability, if you look in the word disability, what do you find? The word ability can be transcended. As long as you're breathing, you have a chance to overcome any obstacle and be what you want to be and do what you want to do. As long as you're breathing. Wherever there is life, there is going to be hope. What happens? You have to keep your dreams alive. Be very careful of what you dream, because it has the power to become reality.
This program is made possible in major part by the Adolph Coors Company. Additional funding was provided by public television stations.